Let's cross now live to Carice Witte, the founder and executive director of Signal, the Sino-Israel Global Network and Academic Leadership. Firstly, thank you very much for taking the time out to be with me this morning. I'd like to begin by asking, surely China is now much more likely to launch military drills near Taiwan, using this visit as a pretext to intimidate the voters ahead of Taiwan's election next year, but also the US's election?
Most likely. China doesn't miss an opportunity to show its strength militarily with respect to Taiwan. And this, from their perspective, is a justification. But from the Western perspective, Lai strikes a good balance between the Chinese perspective and the Western perspective, in that he says he supports the status quo. He's interested in peace and wants to enter into, or is willing to enter into, talks without preconditions. And at the same time, he does talk about a strong and confident Taiwan upholding democracy and personal freedom. So for the West, that is a healthy attitude. But China looks at the DPP as the problematic party, and closely affiliates William Lai with Tsai Ing-wen, who definitely was not their preferred candidate. And in general, China will use a sort of shock and awe exercise of power in order to intimidate and deter. And at the same time, the U.S. support of Taiwan works very hard to deter those exercises moving into being real fire.
Much of the headlines is saying that this is already testing what they consider tense ties between the US and China. But has there ever been a time that there hasn't been such tense ties between the two major superpowers?
Well, the relations have had a range of trajectories. And as we know, when China entered the WTO in 2001, it began a process that many in the West thought would lead to China becoming more democratic, internalizing Western values, and looking more like the United States. That was never really a possibility, but there was a chance that China could have had a softer approach. Nonetheless, we saw the 2008 subprime ruin China's views of the Western secret sauce. And as soon as the West was unable to recover quickly from that, China decided that its ways were preferable. And we've seen, since Xi Jinping came into power, a very strong change in the direction. At the same time, right now, it does look like China is seeking a somewhat softer tone in its relations with the United States, while exercising what it considers to be its core interests. And that explains the rhetoric and the action regarding Taiwan. At the same time, others are saying that there's a great threat of China invading Taiwan. I would support those who are confirming that China is not ready to invade, that it would be too much of a threat to the party and to the leadership should that very difficult engagement fail. The odds of really entering into a hot war over Taiwan would lead to endless troubles for China. So this is very much about posturing at this point.
Carice, meanwhile, there could be bigger politics at play here. You mentioned they wanted to possibly take a softer line when coming to the US. But what about the politics of peacemaking? Could the US be trying to limit China's political influence, as many would claim that it failed to contain its economic influence? China was asked a few months ago by the Palestinians to assist with peace with Israel. Now we've been reporting nonstop about a potential normalization deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia that includes concessions to the Palestinians and brokered by the United States.
Well, this is mixing many different things. First of all, the spheres of influence that involve the great powers are looking at, right at this moment, problems in the South China Sea, where the Chinese Coast Guard shot water cannons at Philippine ships that had every right to be there according to the law of the sea, of UNCLOS, the United Nations law of the sea. And the U.S. is watching that very closely, while at the same time sending 3,000 Marines and other Navy troops to the Straits of Hormuz because of Iranian behavior, ongoing seizing of commercial ships. So the U.S. is trying to deal with China's pressure directly in South China Sea, perhaps its support of Iran, as you noted, through the Iranian-Saudi agreement. Iran has felt strong wind in its sails and confidence to act out in a number of different ways. And it led China also, as you noted, to say that it's interested in bringing the Palestinian conflict to the United Nations. It's incumbent upon Israel and the United States to work together in order to maintain Israel's security integrity and to ensure that the Middle East countries appreciate that the United States is not disappearing and giving up on its security commitments to the region. And I believe that's what those 3,000 troops are supposed to signal.
Right. Carice Witte, the founder and executive director of Signal, the Sino-Israel Global Network and Academic Leadership. Thank you for breaking down the real complex diplomacy in the region.
Thank you.